going to do a couple of videos. And the apartment was in that building over there. Isn't that cool? Really nice. You can come out here and eat your lunch. This is my new hood now. And you come in to the kitchen, and the kitchen is good sized kitchen. You got a bench here.
If Charles did walk out of this apartment, where did he go?
The closest person to us is missing. I'm thinking that someone just has him and he's somewhere. Like, where is he?
The first time that he ever went to Anna's apartment was the last time he was seen alive.
I remember asking her, like, why are you not freaking out?
There were some red flags that started to pop up.
They were extremely concerned. They thought maybe something terrible happened.
Charles Butler's final moments, that's not a good way to go.
Autumn 2012. 56-year-old Florida businessman Charles Butler has just moved back to his hometown, New York City.
This is really nice. I love this city.
He would always talk about how New York City is the greatest place on earth. I'm Molly Butler. I'm Chuck Butler's oldest daughter. Originally, my dad was from Queens. He lived there till early 20s. He said that he went to Florida to visit a friend and ended up meeting my mom. They fell in love pretty quickly, and they ended up getting married after a few years and having the three of us.
After Molly, Charles and his wife Kim welcome Margie and Maxwell. As the family grows, Charles's career takes off.
My dad was definitely a businessman. He owned a pizza shop, and he was actually the first pizza place in Central Florida to start delivery pizza. Then he started doing insurance. He opened up his own insurance company. He just, great businessman, great with finances, very, very smart. I'm Margie Bolton, and I'm Chuck Butler's middle daughter.
We're in love with architecture in New York City.
His heart was always back in New York. He was always a city boy through and through, for sure.
While Charles's business is growing, in 1997, his personal life is upended when he and his wife Kim decide to divorce.
And then they just separated. Like, they literally got together to have us three kids. Like, they just weren't really meant to be together. We would visit my dad on Wednesday nights and every other weekend. He would always try to just make the time that we had the best that it could be. He always made everything fun. One of my favorite memories of all time was a New York vacation. We were on the subway, and my dad starts singing, "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life." And he gets out onto the street.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want you to feel sorry for me, even though I'm down and out.
We were younger at the time. I remember my brother was really embarrassed. Like, "Dad, stop."
My heart's bleeding.
I'm Maxwell Butler. I am Charles Butler's son and the youngest of three.
Oh my God.
It would be so embarrassing for us, but looking back on it, it was just a good time.
In 2012, Charles encourages his oldest daughter, Molly, to follow her career ambitions.
My dad was all about living your dreams. Find out what you're passionate about and make that your business. So I knew that I wanted to be a New York City hairstylist. That was my dream since I was very, very young.
Charles gives Molly a push by suggesting they become roommates.
When I was 24, my dad and I found an apartment in New York City.
Okay. I'm on 78.
And the deal was my dad would come up for 1 weekend out of every month. Well, he was there 3 weeks out of every month.
Charles's part-time residence in New York coincides with another significant turning point.
After he got divorced from my mom, he was never really open to the idea of marriage. But he said, I wanted to find my queen. So he started getting on a bunch of dating websites. He would always make dating websites in New York, even though he lived in Florida.
In the spring, he connects with a woman from Brooklyn named Anna.
My first impression of her was she's super cute. I could totally see why my dad was into her. He was just smitten by her. I had never seen my dad like that before. He was in puppy love.
On September 15th, Charles comes to town for one of his regular visits with his daughter and new girlfriend.
On his way up, he gets into his first class seat and he's taking selfies like, I worked hard and now I'm going to go play hard, and I happen to get the seat next to me is empty, so I get the whole row to myself. He was just so excited about it. He said, this is the way the whole trip is going to be, just blessings everywhere.
Charles makes plans to spend Monday night with just Molly.
We just had the best conversation about, wow, we're living in New York City and I'm a New York City hairstylist. And I was in a very, loving, healthy relationship, and he was in a loving, healthy relationship. We were just reflecting on all of it. I didn't know at the time it was going to be my last conversation with him, but looking back on it, it was literally the most perfect conversation we could have had. It was just awesome.
The next day, Tuesday, Charles has plans with Anna for a special evening.
Tuesday, he had messaged me and he said, hey, I'm actually going to go out to Anna's house tonight. We're going to watch a movie. I'm going to sleep out there. She lived in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. So this was a big deal that he was going to her house for the very first time.
That night, Charles fills Molly in on the date.
So he was messaging me, oh, it's so sweet. I got a home-cooked meal for the first time in forever. We're having a good time. He's like, I got my cantaloupe for the morning. It's great. She's going to go to work, and then I'll come back home, and I'll meet you in the city for lunch tomorrow. I was trying to book one of my flights back to Florida, and for some reason, when I was booking my flight, my credit card wasn't being accepted. So I was asking him, hey, can you buy my flight to Florida? I'll transfer you the money. He said, yeah, absolutely. Remind me in the morning.
The next day, when Molly doesn't hear from him, she texts her dad about the tickets.
And he told me, I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling good. I had a party. And he called me Honey, which my dad had many nicknames for me, and Honey was never one of them. So it didn't really make sense. So it's just like, okay, please book it. When I left work that day, I went home and my dad wasn't home. And I was trying to call him over and over and over, and his phone was dead. I didn't have her number at this point. I didn't know how to get a hold of her, but I also knew that she was the last person that he was with.
The next day, Molly's concern intensifies.
I started getting calls from his employees at the insurance company down in Florida. And they were asking me, we haven't been able to get a hold of your dad. What's going on?
By Friday night, 3 days since she's heard from her dad, Molly is desperate to make contact with Anna.
I find a way to break into my dad's iPad and find Anna's email. So 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, I get an email back from her finally, and she said, "Hey Molly, he left my house on Wednesday morning and broke up with me, and I haven't heard from him since." My dad was head over heels in love with her. He had told me that he was already looking at rings. So at this point, I know something's up. I email her back and I said, "My dad is officially missing."
We still hadn't heard from him, and we were extremely concerned.
It was just as if he just vanished.
Investigators zero in on Charles's final moments.
That was the last footage that we had of Charles. He just vanished the next day.
And the focus falls on a seemingly friendly face.
Have you had the locks changed since this?
Since that, no.
But we didn't know what the role was that she played. That's when I really, really got suspicious.
How does a man who is completely content with his life just go missing? The only thing Charles Butler's family knows is that he went on a date with his new girlfriend Anna, and then abruptly ended their relationship.
I'm talking to her and I say, what happened? What was going on? She says, "We had dinner on Tuesday night. Everything was great. He spent the night. On Wednesday, I went to work."
According to Anna, that morning, Charles stayed in bed in her apartment.
She said that in the morning we were texting each other, and then by the afternoon I was getting texts from him. And then he just broke up with me for no reason. And I said, "Oh, can I see the text messages?" And she goes, "No, I deleted all of them already." And I was like, "Wait, what? Why did you delete the text?" And she said, "Well, because he broke up with me and I was heartbroken and I didn't want anything to remember him by, so I deleted all the texts." I remember asking her, "Why are you not freaking out?" It just felt like she was so disconnected from it, and it just felt weird. I could feel something was off, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I said, "I'm going to call the cops. We need to find my dad." 2 cops showed up. They basically just start taking the information. And I'm telling them every detail that I can give him. His phone was dead for 3 days. I show them the text messages. He was spelling things weird. Certain people will say lowercase OK, and that's how my dad would say it. But this was capital O, period, capital K, period. So just the way that he was texting was weird. It was very obvious that it wasn't him.
Hi, I'm Christopher Heath. I'm the investigative reporter at WFTV Channel 9 in Orlando, Florida. We covered the disappearance of Charles Butler. NYPD comes in, they look at it. There's no evidence of foul play. There's no tracks saying something suspicious is happening, apart from the fact that nobody's heard from him and the cell phone text messages are a little off-putting. New York City is a giant place, and NYPD have a lot on their plate. They say, we're not throwing up roadblocks and shutting down, the boroughs till we find him, because we just don't have enough here pointing us in that direction.
They kind of were just a bunch of people in the city do this all the time. He's probably just hanging out at the beach, trying to just get away from his life. And I was trying to tell them, no, something is happening. This is not okay. This is out of character. One of them, I guess I had pulled on his heartstrings just enough. And he said, "Listen, I'm going to put out a report. They're not going to actively look for your dad, but I'm going to do what I can and figure something out for you. There's not much that we can do, but I'm going to do what I can do to help you."
Despite the detective's assurances, Molly's concern is rising.
And I started freaking out at this point. The closest person to us is missing, literally just vanished out of her life with no answers.
He doesn't go off the radar. With his kids,
He doesn't ignore us. He doesn't take a day or two, no matter how much he parties. When it comes to his kids, like, he's always just there. Something just didn't feel right.
After a few days had passed, my sisters told me that, like, they still hadn't heard from him and that they were extremely concerned and that they thought maybe something terrible happened.
Feeling like they have hit a dead end, the Butler children resolve to take matters into their own hands.
We decided that we were going to have to go the route of a private investigator at this point.
I'm Keith Freeman. I'm a private investigator. I had just come back to Florida from a trip to Central America. I was on my way home when I got the call. I literally turned my car around and booked a flight and went straight up to New York that night.
5 days have passed since anyone has heard from Charles. Freeman begins downloading with Molly.
And I'm telling him all the details. He's like, wow, you did a lot of the legwork for me. Thank you. One of the first things that he had said to me, like, no more contact with Anna whatsoever.
Freeman then digs into the police theory that Charles may have willfully disappeared.
The first step is we check to determine whether Charles had booked a flight through his office, to check his billing records on his credit cards, and found nothing to corroborate the fact that he had made any additional travel plans.
There was no activity anywhere whatsoever. We had all kept trying to call his phone. It was off. We couldn't get through.
With no evidence to support that Charles left on his own accord, Freeman sets out to find him.
The first step is to get as close to where Charles was in his last known location. I was planning to go straight to his girlfriend Anna's house, which is where he was last seen and where the children last believed he was.
When our dad went missing, the last that we had heard was that he was with Anna, so suspicions definitely arose. The first time that he ever went back to her apartment was the last time he was seen alive.
The private investigator hired by the Butler family is on his way to interview the last person to see Charles alive, his girlfriend, Anna.
We went straight to Anna's apartment. We noticed a couple cameras that were located in the apartment building and on the exterior of the apartment building, but we didn't know who owned those cameras and whether they were operational. Anna appeared to be worried about what had happened to Charles, so she was more than happy to talk to us. She described the night that she spent with Charles as perfect. According to Anna, they were in love. So she was extremely concerned about what had happened to him and where he might have gone. No reason to think at that time that there was anything untoward.
But while interacting with Anna, something catches Freeman's eye.
When I entered the apartment, one of the first things I noticed in the hallway on a shelf was a man's watch. It didn't appear to be Charles Butler's watch.
Keith is struck by how flashy the watch is, which doesn't seem to fit Charles's laid-back style.
Keith kept me updated through the whole process, and he had asked her, and she said that it was her ex's watch.
Anna's ex is a 46-year-old Russian immigrant named Mikhail Chernayev.
I asked Anna about her ex-husband. They shared a child together, but they had been divorced for a long time, and Mikhail had been remarried, had another baby. Mikhail had 3 vehicles that he parked in the courtyard behind Anna's residence. So they still maintained enough of a relationship for him to be able to access the parking spaces and use them for his work and his personal cars.
After visiting Anna, Freeman reaches out to the NYPD detectives that offered Molly help. They inform him that they, too, have visited Anna's building. They've discovered that the security cameras there were installed by a resident, and they are working to identify the owner and secure the footage.
Keith kept kind of running into these things where he didn't have access to stuff only the cops did. And since he wasn't a cop, he wasn't able to do some of the stuff. So we kind of had this like stop and go.
Then Molly gets a call from a friend of her father's in Florida.
She told me that a month before he went missing, Anna's ex-husband called my dad from Anna's phone and basically said, "She's my woman, stay away from her." It was just the one threatening call, and nobody really knew about it.
Based upon the fact that Charles had received what he believed was a threatening phone call from Anna's ex-husband, I was definitely suspicious that Mikhail was involved in Chuck's disappearance.
It's now 2 weeks since the Butlers have heard from their father, and the weight of the investigation is taking a toll.
I've heard people describe anxiety attacks, but I had never suffered from one up until this point. And it would just take me out. Like I would get like tunnel vision, I would hyperventilate, I'd be on my knees like crying. It was just literally like survival mode. The way I coped was with alcohol, and I completely numbed out. And had I not met my now husband after my dad went missing, like I truly believe I would be dead today.
Then, on October 4th, 16 days after Charles went missing, the NYPD gains access to the footage from Anna's building and share the material with Freeman. Does this footage contain clues about Charles Butler's final moments?
There was video footage of Charles and Anna entering the front entrance of the apartment complex at about 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. They went shopping, came back, couple just entering the building normally.
At about 7:30 a.m. the following morning, they spot something else.
We have video evidence of Anna on her cell phone outside the residence, and she finally had to go into work.
Freeman continues watching the footage from the rest of the day.
There is no video of Chuck ever leaving the apartment building after Charles and Anna had last entered her apartment. That was the last footage that we had of Charles.
We know he walked into her apartment. We know he is not seen walking out. What happened?
He just vanished the next day.
The footage does, however, reveal a potential clue.
One of the video cameras clearly showed Mikhail's car being parked in the early morning hours.
Hours later, after Anna leaves, the van pulls out.
He was watching the apartment and waiting for her to leave.
Moments later, a camera in the back of Anna's building reveals something else.
The video also captured Mikhail himself coming and going in the courtyard behind Anna's residence. We were able to see his work van leaving and returning on 2 occasions that morning.
While footage from behind the building is obscured, Mikhail's movements in the courtyard, combined with the fact that Charles never walked out the front door, lead investigators to a startling conclusion.
NYPD believed that Charles had met with foul play and that Mikhail assaulted Charles. And the last time that he left in that van, Charles' body was in the van. The NYPD was seeking search warrants on the vehicles specifically that were in the courtyard.
But days later, disaster strikes.
Once in a 100-year event swooped in. Superstorm Sandy struck.
The storm submerges 250,000 vehicles, including Chernayev's.
Sandy washed away a significant portion of any evidence that would have been necessary to connect Mikhail to Charles Butler's disappearance. It was devastating to the investigation.
When potential evidence linking Mikhail Chernayev to the murder of Charles Butler is destroyed in Superstorm Sandy, it's a crushing blow to the investigation.
Superstorm Sandy was devastating to New York and the people in New York. It makes it really challenging for the NYPD to be able to follow up on anything. They were at a standstill on the case for several months.
5 months into the investigation, Freeman knows the likelihood that Charles is alive is slim.
The words that Keith had used, it's like, your dad's not coming back. Like, he's officially, like, gone. I still can't tell you any answers, but we do know that he's gone.
In my teenage years, my dad and I would just kind of butt heads, I think. Like, we didn't always have the best relationship. I remember the last trip he made me get out of the car and give him a hug, which was very unusual because we didn't do that a lot. But we hugged and told each other we loved each other, and that was the last time I saw him.
Mikhail Chernayev is still the NYPD's lead suspect, but there's no evidence to charge him with murder.
NYPD cared about this case, but he was a missing person. They didn't have any evidence to really lead them to anything else.
There's not the physical evidence. There's not a pool of blood somewhere. There's no body.
In the face of a stalled investigation, Keith Freeman pitches an idea to the Butler children.
We decided to talk to the media in hopes of gaining additional information about what had happened to Charles.
The private investigator had gone, I think, as far as he could and asked if we'd be willing to take a look at this case.
If Charles did walk out of this apartment, where did he go? He didn't have a car in New York City. He would have either had to take a taxi or public transportation.
Where the trail for us goes cold is once he arrives at Anna's apartment. We needed to go see some of these places. We needed to try and get an interview with Anna since she was the last one to see him alive. She decides, yeah, she'd like to talk to us. Let's see if she'll shine some light on these last couple of hours.
And we loved each other, and we wanted to spend our life together.
Charles and Anna went to her apartment. The next morning, Anna says she gave Charles a key to the apartment and left for work. That would be the last time she or anyone else who knew Charles Butler would see him alive.
I gave him the key. He closed upper lock. So it means that he left.
Have you had the locks changed since this?
Since that, no.
Why not get your locks changed? But she hadn't. It hadn't even crossed her mind. Later on in the interview, I asked about when she got back, had he made the bed? And she couldn't remember. And just some of her reactions were, to me, there were some red flags that started to pop up. We knew Mikhail was a character within this larger story. When I asked about Mikhail, she seemed to dismiss the idea that Mikhail was somehow involved. She said, he's not behind this.
As Christopher Heath is reporting his story, another news organization reveals surprising information about Anna and Mikhail.
we found out that she basically started dating her ex again. That's when I really, really got suspicious. We didn't think that maybe she was involved in what happened, but she might have been involved in protecting Mikhail from getting caught.
Christopher Heath's report airs in late February of 2013.
The next day, we had a different response from the NYPD. We had the involvement of the state police. We had the involvement of senior detectives in Brooklyn and Manhattan.
With intrigue swirling around Anna, the NYPD turns to a specialist.
I'm Konstantin Papadopoulos, a detective with the New York City Police Department, assigned to investigate the Charles Butler missing persons case. We really wanted to know, was Anna involved in any way of Mr. Butler's disappearance, or if she had prior knowledge of it or any of that. We wanted Anna polygraphed.
Eight months after Charles Butler disappeared, an NYPD detective is interrogating his girlfriend, Anna.
I needed to find out if she had any prior knowledge of Mr. Butler's disappearance or if she had any involvement in his disappearance. So when I spoke to Anna, her demeanor was very cooperative. Anna told me she wanted to find out what happened to him as well. I asked about her ex-husband, Mikhail. She met Mikhail in Russia. They also have a son in common, but they did have their differences. According to Anna, he was a very jealous person, questioned her a lot about different things, even though they were not together. He was still jealous. During my course of the interview with Anna, she didn't believe Mikhail had something to do with his disappearance. But you don't know what's going on in someone's head, you know? At the end of the polygraph, she came up, no deception indicated. She had no involvement in Charles Butler's disappearance, so she was in the dark.
With no additional insight or evidence, the investigation is at a standstill. But the following day, the NYPD gets an unexpected call from officials in upstate New York.
There was a fisherman whose boat had broken down in an infrequently traveled area. The fisherman got out of his boat near the shoreline and stumbled upon a body.
When the body was found upstate New York, that DNA was matched with the DNA that the case detective submitted. Then they could ultimately say, yes, this is Charles Butler that was found by the lost fisherman.
After 8 months, Charles Butler has been found.
I remember getting the phone call. I was still in New York. It was more brutal and gory than we could have ever imagined. I had to not only take the information in for myself, but then immediately turn around and tell my brother and sister.
I don't know. Looking back, it kind of feels like that was almost I don't know if the right word is relief. I remember it was a really heavy night of drinking for me, that's all I know. That really sucks.
For investigators, the discovery of the body is the first piece of solid evidence in the case.
Charles is found under suspicious circumstances. So now the investigation is going to change. So at this point, the detective calls me up and asks if I could polygraph Mikhail. He voluntarily came, yes. He was very cooperative. He seemed enthusiastic to help. He's a middle-aged man, a medium to large build, brown hair, balding a little bit.
Without revealing that Charles's body has been found, Papadopoulos begins his routine.
Whenever you interrogate somebody that's suspected of a crime, it's a long process. First off, with Mikhail, I built some rapport with him. We sat down, we spoke about common things, what he did for a living, where is he from in Russia, when did he come to the United States, questions like that. Just try to build rapport and see where his mindset's at for the polygraph later on. I asked Mikhail the regular questions that any investigator would ask him. Do you know him? Have you ever met him? Mikhail denied that he knew Charles. He explained to me that he knew that Anna was dating somebody, but he didn't know who it was.
Then Papadopoulos suddenly produces a document, a map of the exact area where Charles's body was found.
The demeanor that he had quickly changed. He was very nervous. At this point, everything came crashing around Mikhail.
When confronted with a map of the location where Charles Butler's body was discovered, lead suspect Mikhail Chernayev begins changing his story.
I'm sure Mikhail thought in his mind that, okay, as long as they don't find Mr. Butler, I'm going to be okay. But Mr. Butler was found, and then everything came crashing around Mikhail.
Before the polygraph begins, Mikhail begins speaking freely about Charles and Anna.
Upon questioning by the NYPD, he confessed that he was in love with Anna, and he was jealous over anybody having a relationship with her, that in his mind, he went to the apartment to confront Charles about the relationship.
Mikhail said he walked over to Anna's place. After he observed her leaving for work, approximately 7:30 a.m., he knew that Charles would be home, knocked on the door, a confrontation ensued.
According to Mikhail, he pushed his way into the apartment. Charles screamed at him. Mikhail asked him to be quiet. When he didn't, Mikhail punched him in the face and knocked him down. He said that Charles still would not stop screaming. Mikhail took a knife from the kitchen counter, stabbed Charles, and suffocated him. Mikhail's explanation was that he was possessed by a demon.
We never got to the polygraph examination because during the pretest interview, Mikhail confessed to Mr. Butler's demise. Mikhail told me that he didn't want Anna to find out that he had any involvement in this. So he took Charles Butler's body to a location upstate where he used to go on vacation, a secluded area. And that's where he dumped Charles Butler's body. Charles Butler's final moments, that's not a good way to go.
Papadopoulos then questions Mikhail about the bizarre messages that were sent to Anna and the Butler children after Charles was dead.
Charles Butler's cell phone had a lock feature on it. So I asked Michael, I go, how did you use Mr. Butler's cell phone? Because you were texting people. Michael clearly said it was easy. I just took the SIM card out and put it in my phone, and I was able to use the phone. So I asked him, well, why did you do this to Michael? And he said to trick everybody.
Mikhail is arrested for the murder of Charles Butler. The following day, investigators go in search of additional evidence to bolster their case.
The NYPD fluoroceled looking for blood samples, and were able to find a very small drop of blood in the kitchen that matched Charles Butler.
Chernayev is indicted on charges of second-degree murder. Months later, he recants his confession, and the case moves to trial. And again, the woman at the center of the deadly love triangle becomes an object of curiosity.
She got asked to testify for both sides. You could tell, like, she was in a really weird position. I watched her face when they showed his confession video, and it was the first time she ever heard it. Like, it dawned on her. It took a year and a half for her to even connect it in her own mind that he was the one that killed my dad. Like, he did it. And what he was telling her at the time was that he was in jail in place of her. He told her that they were trying to arrest her for killing my dad, and he's taking the blame for her. I feel like she was innocent in it. I feel like she was innocent almost to a fault, but that she was tricked by him too.
On September 29th, 2016, almost 4 years from when Charles was killed, there is a verdict.
A jury comes back and finds him guilty of murder. The judge handed down a sentence of 25 years to life.
With the trials behind us, I felt like we were finally able to create our own closure, if you will. The grieving process is something I still struggle with. I'm grateful for the time that we did have together, because he raised me to be the man I am today.
Monday night we had that really awesome conversation. I think that trip he was the most excited I had ever seen. And I think part of it was because, of course, he's coming back to the city that he loves.
Saturday afternoon in the city, street festival. How do you like this neighborhood, huh?
And he was going to see the woman that he fell in love with and get ready for a really epic weekend in New York.
The last time that he had texted me, I was supposed to go get air in my tires. He had texted me, like, make sure you get air in your tires. My dad was my best friend, and any question that I ever asked was never off the table. What you couldn't see in yourself, like my dad could see it in you. He was our best friend. Like, he was my closest friend. The bond was there.